Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is Lucy Rivera and I am your host today. Today we have a very special guest, Congressman Mike Capuano from the 7th Congress District. Congressman Capuano, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here, Lucy.
And an episode of this interview can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Congressman Capuano, please tell us about your involvement in the committees in Congress. What committee are you involved in right now?
I'm on 3 committees at the moment. The Committee on Financial Services, which deals with banking and mortgages, things like that, some Wall Street stuff. I'm on the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, which does just that, highways, subways, things like that. And I'm also on the Committee on Ethics, which kind of helps make sure that any members of Congress who might cross the line and do something wrong are held to account. So those are the 3 committees I'm on at the moment.
And in the Transportation Committee, Congressman Capuano, what are some of the issues that you see?
Well, one of the major issues is mostly Democrats are trying to get more money for infrastructure, to build our roads, to repair our roads, to repair our subway system and fix them and expand them. We haven't had a lot of success with the minority party, so the Republicans have they don't want to spend any money on anything. So other than that, we try right now, we're working on an FAA bill so that we can have some say over the airplanes above us on all kinds of issues. We're working on a railroad bill that'll help keep things like Amtrak running. We're also working on something called pipelines and hazardous materials to make sure that the materials that get through pipelines are also reasonably well regulated to be safe.
And your office actually also let us know about the extension of the Green Line. Would you like to talk to us about that?
Well, when I took office, it was pretty clear to anybody who would look, that the inner core had been forgotten relative to mass transit. Everything that got built was commuter lines out to the suburbs for a long time. So we decided right away to commit ourselves towards trying to reinstate some of the services that used to be in the inner cities. And one of the first things we did was the Fairmount line, which is not far from where we're sitting at the moment, to try to get that up and running. And then we turned our attention to extending the Green Line. And that's the next project in line. And once we get that done, there'll be others.
So tell us about, in terms of the Green Line and the expansion, what are your efforts into doing, and why do you see that's valuable? Talk to us about all this.
People who live in the inner city, and Somerville is an inner city, it's not part of Boston, but it's just like this neighborhood. People who live in the inner city, they really rely on public transportation. And I think they deserve high quality public transportation. They deserve to be able to be within walking distance of fixed rail. And once the Green Line is done and the Fairmount Line is really up and running, it's not fully finished yet, pretty much 80 some odd % of my district will be within walking distance of fixed rail to be able to get from one place to another. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
Tell us about your district and what part of the district is, how is the district involved in this expansion?
Well, my district is 75% of Boston, and Somerville, Cambridge, Everett, Chelsea, Randolph, and Milton. It's very diverse. It's probably one of the most diverse districts in the country. And when I say diverse, everybody uses the term differently. I mean where there is a good chance that the person who lives next to you doesn't look like you, doesn't talk like you, it doesn't have the same ethnicity or religion. So it's really fun to represent so many different kinds of people. But yet they all have many things in common. Everybody wants a safe neighborhood. Everybody wants reasonable transportation. Everybody wants good education for their children. Everybody wants affordable housing. So that the issues, though there are differences, they're not that many differences.
Oh, and then your office mentioned that you secured some funds towards this project.
Well, that's part of my job, is to secure as much money as I can for anything I can. In this particular case, we were able to get the federal government to come up with half the cost of what the state said it was going to be.
Great.
And it's about $1 billion, so it's a big investment. It'll take about 10 years to get it done, but it's a big investment, and I'm proud to have done it. I'm glad to have done it. We did something similar to the Fairmount Line not too long ago, that's my job, is to try to grab as much as I can for this district.
That's a great accomplishment, $1 billion from the federal
Once it's done, it will be. It's not done yet.
And Congressman Capuano, also, I spoke to your office and they talked about the Sudan and your involvement with it. Would you tell us about it? And if we have time, we'll go to talk about your other committees that you're involved with.
Well, I got involved in Sudan by accident, to be perfectly honest. I had met a person who had some problems there, and I didn't really go to Congress to get involved with it. I don't know that I could have picked Sudan off of a map, to be perfectly honest. But we got involved in it once because the government was allowing old-fashioned slavery to occur. They weren't part of it, but they turned a blind eye towards it. And so we got involved with that deeply, and then within a few years, the government also participated in committing a genocide in a place called Darfur, which is a part of Sudan. And millions of people were slaughtered by their own government. And then there was a revolution in the South, and we helped encourage and support the revolutionaries who wanted to have their own government, and we helped very proudly help create the newest democracy in the world, South Sudan, which is having some troubles now. We're trying to get them on the right track again.
What are some of the challenges that you're seeing there?
In South Sudan, they were a democracy. Everybody fought against Sudan at first. They created their own country. But, like in many places around the world, this is a tribal society, and the different tribes don't always get along. They have multi-year problems. Hundreds of years ago, somebody did something to somebody. And within about 2 years, they started having problems. And they have the Dinka tribe or the Nuer tribe, which are the two largest. And they split, and they started fighting amongst themselves. And now, there's still it's calmed down a little lately, but there was pretty much of a full-blown revolution going on. And we're doing everything we can to try to remind people that you just fought for your own freedom. Get that together. And it's hard to do. America went through this as well with the Civil War. We had our own problems, but we were able to survive them, and we're hoping that South Sudan will be able to do the same thing.
And as far as the United Nations, is there any appeal that you are doing to partner and help and get involved?
The United Nations is a great organization, and it means well, but it doesn't have the teeth that it really needs to get a lot of things done in difficult areas. They're trying to bring peace to the region, but Sudan is located right next to Ethiopia and right south of Egypt and right next to Libya. It's a very tough neighborhood, and there's problems everywhere. So the UN is always having their hands full, trying to bring people together. We help them do that. We encourage them to do that. They do as good a job as they can reasonably do. They can't force people to get along. And so we work very closely with them to try to bring stability to the region.
And Congressman Capuano, would you comment as to how you are, those efforts in bringing stability, and why particularly are you sticking with Sudan?
It just kind of happened. It wasn't a plan. And to be perfectly honest, and I've told the Sudanese government this, in my district, we have some Sudanese people, but the average person, I represent 780,000 people. To be perfectly honest, if Sudan was wiped off the map, almost no one would notice. I know that. But at the same time, that's not what drives me. What drives me is that whenever there's a genocide anywhere, when the government is slaughtering not just innocent, but victims that have no weapons, no defense of their own, innocent women and children in their own villages, I think the whole world should stand up. It's not about the fact that they're poor. It's not about the fact that they're mostly black. It's not about their religion. It's not about any of those things. It's about no one should be subject to a genocide, and I think that every human being has an obligation to speak out and do what they can do, which is not a lot sometimes, to at least get people to stop slaughtering each other. So that's how I got involved, and there's no good political reason to do it because there's no political payback, but again, sometimes you're called to do things that are just right, and that's this situation.
Thank you, Congressman Capuano. Tell us about other initiatives in Congress. For instance, your office mentioned something about the appropriations. Yeah. What is an appropriation?
Appropriation is just a fancy word for getting money. I mean, we have to appropriate money for the Defense Department, the Housing Department, and it has become tougher. The Congress is now run by people who don't think the federal government should be spending much money. They'd like to cut the amount of money being spent, particularly for non-defense items. And that would mean housing, education, healthcare, roads, all the things that the average person sees every day. And there are those of us who think that those investments, and that's what they are. I think when you build a new subway system, when you improve the roads, when you build a new school, when you provide housing to seniors, I think that's an investment in your community. And I think that's what a society does. We all get together and chip in a few dollars. Hopefully those of us who are wealthier chip in more. And that's fair. And the dollars we put together as a group, we then use to improve the group. And those dollars are called taxes. So we have a tax system and we try to gather money, and then we take that money and make investments. Some of it's in the Defense Department, but some of it should be, in my opinion, in housing. No one should be homeless. No senior citizen should have to choose between rent and food or heat. And so we try to do the best we can. And you can't do everything for everybody, nor should you. But that's the struggle in Washington, and that's what, that's appropriations are the main struggle that we have.
And describe the process of...
The process is very simple. The president comes up with a budget. This year they ignored the budget. The Republican-led Congress just said we're not even going to consider it. And then the House goes through a process where they come up with their own budgets. We are in the process of doing that this year. We're having a hard time doing it because the people, the majority, comes up with bills that we don't think are even reasonable. I mean, not that we have difference of opinion, but they're not even close. And it's kind of funny. Everybody says, well, you're in Washington. Why don't you just get along? Sometimes you get along if you understand the value of compromise. The fact that, yes, I have certain beliefs, but if you have different beliefs, we have to work together. I have to give a little, you have to give a little. It doesn't mean I've given up my principles. It means, okay, here are my principles, but I can't get everything I believe in. Maybe I can get 10% or 20% or 50% of what I believe in, but you have to be able to give up something too. And the problem is right now that the Congress is being run, for the most part, by people who do not believe in compromise. They believe it's my way or the highway. And although I respect that, that puts me in the position, and many people who agree with me, to say, well, then it's the highway. Let's go fight. And to the outside person, it says, well, you're just not getting along. You're not doing your job. I am doing my job. My job is to push the agenda that the people have elected me to do. And in this particular case, it means trying to stop people from cutting all these funds and hurting the people I represent. So it looks like we're not getting anything done. We're not getting anything done, but there's a reason for it. It's not just because we don't like each other. It's not because of our party affiliation. It's because we have very serious differences on very important issues. It's nothing small to provide housing to senior citizens. That's not a small item. And maybe it's small to some people because they don't deal with it. But if they don't know anybody who lives in senior housing, come talk to me. I'll introduce them to somebody who's on food stamps, somebody who's getting an education, somebody who needs a job, somebody who can't pay for the heat, on and on and on. Government's the only one who builds roads. They're the only ones who fix up the MBTA, and on and on and on. And my job is to, again, here are the principles. Let's compromise to get something done. But if you're not willing to give up anything, well, then you put me in a position of me not being able to give up anything.
It's really insightful, Congressman Capuano. What would you say are the bills, a couple of bills in the appropriation?
We do everything, every single thing. I mean, it's kind of funny, and people don't realize that most of the money that they see on a local level. I just came from a meeting. They're dealing with the community development block grant money. This is funds to go to. This is the Main Streets program. Almost every penny through the Main Streets program is federal tax dollars, because the money comes from the federal government collects taxes. We gather the money together, and one program we do is the Main Streets program, and we then give it back to various cities, and they go through the Main Streets program, and then they give out the money as best they can to local shop owners and whatever they can do to improve a neighborhood. And people don't see it as federal money. Well, it is federal money. The Fairmont line that we just talked about, almost all of the money used to rebuild the Fairmont line was federal money. The federal government didn't do it. We went to the state and gave the money to the state, and the state gave it to the MBTA, and the MBTA did it. But the money came from the federal government taxes.
The Fairmont line is different from the Green Line extension.
The Fairmont line is a commuter rail that runs pretty much from Hyde Park all the way downtown to the South Station. And it services an area of the city that was serviced once by the old location of the Orange Line. Not exactly, but close. And now it provides service to people. The Orange Line was moved during 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It was moved over to where it is now, leaving a big swath of Roxbury and Dorchester where these trains run through. The commuter rail runs through, but they didn't stop. Now some of them stop, and people have the opportunity to get downtown and catch on to the rest of the subway system without having to drive.
Today we are listening to Congressman Capuano talk about budget issues in Congress, talking about Sudan and South Sudan, talking about his initiatives in Congress, the bills. This episode can be watched at www.discoveringthelaw.com, and my name is Lucy Rivera. Congressman Capuano, which one is your, in terms of the Green Line extension, which is that your favorite project in transportation, or what?
It's my favorite one now because it's the one we're not done with. As soon as it's done with, my favorite one will become the next one, whatever that might be. There's a lot of services, especially when it comes to public transportation, a lot more services that can be done, but they all cost money. So my job is to work with the state, try to get them interested in some of the things we're interested in. Once this is done, fixed rail probably won't be done, but then we have to start improving it. For instance, the Fairmont line is a classic example. It's up and running, but it needs a lot more work. We need new engines, we need new cars, we need more frequent service. But that all takes money, and we had to get the service up and running. We had to build the stations, we had to fix the track before we did that. And that's not fully completed, but close to done yet now.
Why is transportation important?
Because everybody I know has to get back and forth to work, has to get back and forth to school, and in any urban area, we don't want everybody driving if we can help it. But if you can't get there by a bus or a subway, you have no choice but to drive. So the idea is to provide an alternative to people to get them out of their cars and make their commutes easier and more efficient. So and it works. When it works well. If anybody who lives next or near within walking distance of the Orange Line, they know exactly what I'm talking about, or the Red Line on the other side of Dorchester. And people understand that, but not everybody has the same service, and that's my job, is to do the best we can to at least equal out the opportunities.
And I've been told that we have 10 minutes. Would you like to tell us about Congress' effort with the Zika virus? I know your office mentioned.
Well, we're having that fight right now. Democrats want to deal with it. The Zika virus is the most recent danger of a virus that hasn't been seen, to my knowledge. I won't say ever, but certainly not one that we were familiar with. Not very frequent, and it's a very terrible disease, especially if you're a pregnant woman. And I'm sure, I hope people have seen on TV. It's not a story. It's real. If a pregnant woman gets this virus, she has a real chance of delivering a child with a serious, lifelong, terrible injury to the child, which of course would cost society millions of dollars to then take care of that child. These children would probably never be capable of taking care of themselves. And I think, again, government has an obligation to protect people from injuries and diseases when we can. Right now, there's not much of a cure for Zika. There's no cure for Zika that I'm aware of. Once you get it, the only thing we can do is to try to keep the mosquito population down. And that's really where it comes from. It comes from a mosquito bite. Mm-hmm. And it's not widespread in America yet. And some people think, well, it's not here. Well, that's true. But it's in the Caribbean. And it's coming because you cannot keep mosquitoes out of this country. They don't have visas. They don't, they'll be here. And especially in the South. I mean, the mosquito season's upon us. And they're gonna get to Florida, and once they get to Florida, they'll work their way up like all insects do. And there was just a baby born in New Jersey 2 days ago, I think, to a woman who had I can't remember the name of the disease, but your brain gets shrunk.
Encephalitis.
It's a terrible disease, and now again, this woman got the disease in Honduras, but at the same time, it's coming. And if it's in Honduras, it'll take time to get up through Mexico. And once it gets up through Mexico, get to Texas. And we're trying to get money to fight the disease. To number one, control mosquitoes, and number two, invest in scientists to try to find a cure, try to find a preventative. Just like they did for polio. I had a sister who died from polio in the 50s. People don't die from polio anymore. Right. But they did in the 50s until people got together and did a lot of investigation, a lot of scientific work. And it's the same thing here. Why would we sit still for a potential virus that could impact 1 or a million of our people? Why would we do that? And so we're trying to get funding for it, and we're having difficulty because there are some people, as I said, they just don't want to spend money on anything. And it's like, well, wait till it happens in your neighborhood, and then you'll be screaming for it. And I believe in what's the old story, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's the same thing here. I think the money would be well spent to try to prevent it. It's nothing I would wish on anyone.
Absolutely. We have 5 minutes. Please share with us some of your last thoughts or some of your challenges in Congress or something you would like to share.
My last thoughts, look, it's an election year. We have a serious election for president. I know that some people think, oh, well, I only have one vote. It doesn't matter. I only have one vote. I only get to vote for president one time. I wish I could vote 100 times, one time. Everybody's vote matters. It matters the same. It doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. It means you'll be part of the process. I kind of think if you're eligible to vote and you choose not to vote, you're almost giving up your right to complain about anything, or giving up your ability to have any hope of changing whatever it is you don't like. The other part of it that it gets, so everybody, first of all, needs to vote. Second of all, then people, oh, they're all the same. Anybody who says they're all the same, they're not paying attention. Now, that doesn't mean that we agree with that individual person. I say it jokingly, but it's true. I've been married for 42 years. My wife and I don't agree on everything. So that being the case, if you're looking for somebody who agrees with you on everything, you're never going to find that person. And that's not the point. The point is there's going to be a president, a governor, a mayor, a city council, a state rep, a congressman, whether you vote or not. Do you or do you not want to have a voice in that matter? And if you don't, that to me is about as close as you can get to be un-American. So for me, I want people to vote. I want people to understand that there is a difference. And I also want people to understand that if they're looking for perfection, they will never find it. They get a choice of candidates, pick the best one, not the perfect one, but the best one of the candidates you have. And if you do, I think America will be a better place if people vote and vote their own interests.
Thank you, Congressman Capuano.
Thanks,
for
Lucy.
our viewers, thank you so much for your time. And this episode will be at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Today, we're privileged of having Congressman Mike Capuano from the 7th District, Congress District. And my name is Lucy Rivera. Thank you for watching.